My mother-in-law removed me from the family WhatsApp group because I wasn't a real wife yet, and I never imagined something so small would slowly unravel her control over the entire family. I married my husband Ethan 4 years ago, and from the outside, his family looked like the kind people brag about having. His father, Mark, was soft-spoken and predictable in a comforting way. His younger sister Claire was sharp-tongued but loyal, and his mother Lorraine was the kind of woman who smiled constantly and hugged too tightly, like she needed to prove affection rather than feel it. When Ethan proposed, Lorraine cried loudly in the restaurant and immediately told the waiter she was gaining a daughter. She added me to the family WhatsApp group that same night and wrote "Welcome to the family" in all caps with heart emojis. For years, that group chat felt like background noise to my life. Recipes sent late at night, blurry photos of grocery store deals, reminders about birthdays and dentist appointments, debates about what time Sunday dinner should start. I never thought twice about it because it felt permanent, like marriage itself, something that, once given, couldn't be taken away. Then, Ethan and I made the mistake of being honest about wanting to wait before having children. We didn't want to rush. We had just bought a small townhouse outside Raleigh and were trying to stabilize our finances. Lorraine nodded and said she respected thoughtful decisions, but her eyes changed slightly, like she had started calculating something. From that moment, everything became about timelines. Subtle comments slipped into conversations, jokes about empty nurseries, remarks about how a woman's body knows when it's ready even if her mind doesn't. I laughed them off at first, but after a while, the repetition started to feel like pressure disguised as concern. Then Claire announced she was pregnant less than a year into her marriage, and Lorraine exploded with joy in a way I had never seen before. The WhatsApp group turned into a celebration channel overnight. Ultrasound photos posted hourly, Lorraine narrating every appointment like a live broadcast, people congratulating Claire endlessly while I slowly faded into the background of the conversation. One afternoon, while sitting at my desk at work, I went to check the chat after missing several notifications, only to realize it was gone completely. Not muted, not archived, just erased from my phone like it never existed. I restarted the app thinking it was a glitch, but nothing changed. My chest tightened as I typed Ethan's name and asked if the family chat was acting weird for him. He replied minutes later saying no and asked why. When I told him I couldn't see it at all, his typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared, like he didn't know how to phrase the truth. He finally said he'd talk to his mom. That evening he came home quiet and avoided eye contact until I pressed him. Lorraine had removed me herself and told him the group was for immediate family matters now, especially with a baby on the way, and since I wasn't contributing to family growth yet, she thought it made sense to limit the audience. She framed it as practicality, not cruelty. Ethan argued, but she brushed him off, saying I wouldn't even notice since I wasn't very active anyway. I noticed immediately. I noticed when no one told me about a last-minute dinner change and I showed up an hour early, alone. I noticed when photos were taken and shared and I wasn't tagged because I wasn't there digitally. I noticed when I found out about Mark going to the hospital for chest pain from a neighbor instead of family. Lorraine never confronted me directly. She just smiled and acted normal in person while quietly excluding me behind a screen. Then she created a new WhatsApp group called Core Family Only and added everyone except me, including cousins, spouses, and even Mark's brother who lived out of state. I became the only married-in member left out, and the message was clear even if no one said it out loud. I wasn't real family until I produced something. Ethan tried to add me back twice, and both times Lorraine removed me within hours. When Ethan confronted her, she said she didn't want unnecessary conflict in the chat and accused me of being sensitive and misinterpreting boundaries. She told him once I had something meaningful to share, like pregnancy updates or childcare discussions, then it would make sense for me to rejoin. Weeks passed, and the isolation worsened. Plans were made without me, jokes referenced conversations I never saw, decisions were announced as facts instead of discussions. Then, Lorraine decided to plan a vow renewal for herself and Mark for their 40th anniversary and announced it in the Core Family Only chat. She framed it as a surprise gift from the children and grandchildren, even though Mark had never mentioned wanting one. Screenshots flooded Ethan's phone. She booked a vineyard venue, chose linen colors, assigned speaking roles, and demanded financial contributions from everyone, including Ethan. When Ethan suggested asking his parents what they actually wanted, Lorraine accused him of ruining the surprise and removed him from the chat temporarily for being disruptive. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about family organization, it was about dominance. Lorraine needed control and used access as leverage. That night, Ethan sat on the couch staring at his phone like something had cracked open inside him. Days later, Lorraine messaged me directly for the first time since removing me, asking if I could talk sense into Ethan about contributing more money, since I wasn't in the chat and might see things more objectively. I replied calmly that since I wasn't considered immediate family anymore, I didn't feel comfortable influencing immediate family decisions. The silence afterward was deafening. 2 days later, Lorraine removed Ethan permanently from the Core Family Only chat and told him he was being manipulated by me. Family members began whispering privately, asking why spouses were excluded and why people kept disappearing from conversations. That's when I made the call that shifted everything. I contacted Lorraine's older sister Helen, a woman known for blunt honesty and zero tolerance for nonsense, and framed it as wanting to support Lorraine during a stressful time. Helen listened quietly, then laughed and said Lorraine had always confused control with leadership. Within days, Helen created a separate WhatsApp group including everyone Lorraine excluded and announced a family reunion weekend at the lake house she owned, scheduled the same weekend as the vow renewal. Relatives flocked to it because Helen never played games. Lorraine panicked and called me crying about deposits, vendors, and embarrassment, begging me to talk to Helen and get her to change the date. I told her gently that I couldn't coordinate family matters I wasn't included in. She hung up without a word. Screenshots of removals started circulating when Ethan rejoined Helen's group and shared evidence. Mark finally spoke up publicly, saying he didn't want a vow renewal, or speeches, or vineyards. He wanted ribs and lawn chairs and peace. Lorraine's authority collapsed in real time. She left all chats claiming emotional burnout. Days later, she showed up at our door, smaller, quieter, admitting she had felt herself losing relevance and tried to tighten her grip instead of loosening it. She apologized for excluding me and asked if things could be fixed. I told her inclusion couldn't be conditional, and family wasn't something you earned by milestones. She agreed and handed admin rights to Ethan and Claire. She posted an apology, acknowledging harm without excuses. The original family WhatsApp group was revived, jokes, recipes, and chaos returned. Months later, when Ethan and I announced we were expecting, she asked permission before posting anything, and when she added me back, she never removed me again. After Lorraine disappeared from the chats, things didn't magically improve overnight. And that was something I didn't expect, because even when the person causing the harm steps back, the damage lingers in the quiet spaces they leave behind. The family WhatsApp group existed again, but it felt cautious, like everyone was testing the temperature before speaking freely. People typed and deleted messages, hesitating, unsure who still had authority or whether Lorraine was silently watching. Ethan tried to reassure me that things were changing, but I could tell he was grieving something too. The illusion of his mother as the emotional center of the family had cracked, and there was no way to glue it back together neatly. Weeks passed, and Lorraine stayed distant. She showed up to Sunday lunches, polite, restrained, almost rehearsed, like someone attending a work function rather than family. She complimented food she didn't eat much of and asked surface-level questions before retreating into silence. Claire tried to bridge the gap by including me in conversations and texting me privately when plans were made, but the tension hovered constantly. Then came the first real test when Mark scheduled a minor surgery and the family needed to coordinate visits, rides, meals, and childcare for Claire. Normally, Lorraine would have taken over completely, but this time she said nothing and waited to see who would step up. The WhatsApp group filled with confusion, suggestions, overlapping messages, people asking who was in charge. Helen stepped in calmly, assigning days and tasks without drama, and something shifted subtly as people realized the family could function without Lorraine controlling every detail. I saw it in the way Claire relaxed in the chat, and the way Mark thanked everyone individually instead of praising Lorraine exclusively. But Lorraine noticed too, and the loss of control gnawed at her. She began making passive comments in person about how disorganized things felt, and how she used to manage everything more efficiently. She never mentioned the WhatsApp group directly, but her resentment leaked through tone and timing. Then one afternoon, Claire pulled me aside while we were washing dishes and admitted Lorraine had been pressuring her privately, saying that if I hadn't interfered, the family would still be united and organized. She accused me of manipulating Ethan and turning people against her. Claire said she defended me, but Lorraine cried and said she felt replaced in her own family. The guilt tactics were still there, just quieter, more targeted. I realized then that Lorraine wasn't learning how to share power, she was learning how to apply pressure in subtler ways. The next escalation came unexpectedly when Lorraine announced she would be hosting Thanksgiving at her house and sent the message not in the family WhatsApp group, but directly to Ethan and Claire only. She intentionally bypassed the shared space, forcing them to relay the information. When Ethan asked why she didn't just post it in the group, she said she didn't want confusion and would tell people personally. But what she really wanted was control over who was invited and how information flowed. Invitations became conditional, whispered arrangements instead of open plans. Relatives asked me quietly if they were expected to bring anything or what time to arrive because they hadn't heard directly from Lorraine. The fragmentation was deliberate and exhausting. I watched Ethan struggle, caught between wanting peace and recognizing manipulation. The breaking point came 3 days before Thanksgiving, when Lorraine messaged Ethan saying she didn't think it was appropriate for me to attend this year because emotions were still raw and she wanted to keep things calm for Mark. She framed it as concern, not exclusion, and suggested Ethan come alone to avoid tension. Ethan stared at the message for a long time before showing it to me, his jaw tight, his hands shaking slightly. This wasn't about a WhatsApp group anymore. This was about erasing me physically as well as digitally. Ethan called her immediately and put the phone on speaker. Lorraine repeated herself calmly, saying family dynamics were fragile and she didn't want arguments ruining the holiday. Ethan asked her directly if she believed I was family, and there was a pause, long enough to hear her breathe. She said, of course, but sometimes space was necessary. Ethan told her if I wasn't welcome, then neither was he, and ended the call. The fallout was immediate. Lorraine called Claire crying, accusing Ethan of choosing his wife over his mother, as if that was some kind of betrayal rather than the natural order of adulthood. Claire told her gently that Ethan wasn't wrong and that excluding spouses wasn't healthy. Lorraine accused her of being influenced by Helen and me. That Thanksgiving ended up being hosted at Helen's lake house instead, with nearly everyone attending, including Mark, who said he was tired of being the excuse for other people's behavior. Lorraine stayed home alone by choice, and later told people she needed time to reflect. The family WhatsApp group buzzed with photos, laughter, recipes, and gratitude, and for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider watching from the edge. Months passed, and Lorraine slowly re-entered conversations, cautiously, no longer an admin, no longer issuing directives, but commenting occasionally, sharing a photo here or there. She never removed anyone again, but the hierarchy she relied on was gone, and she knew it. The real twist came the following spring, when Lorraine asked me to meet her for coffee alone, something she had never done before. She looked older that day, smaller, less composed, and admitted she felt invisible now that no one deferred to her automatically. She said she didn't know who she was without managing everyone else's lives, and that when she removed me from the WhatsApp group, it felt like reclaiming control over something she could still influence. She said she didn't expect it to backfire so completely. I listened without interrupting, because for the first time, she wasn't defending herself, she was admitting fear. I told her quietly that family isn't something you gatekeep, it's something you nurture, and when you turn it into a reward system, people eventually stop playing. She nodded and apologized again, this time without conditions or explanations. I accepted it, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because holding on to resentment would only give her continued power over my emotions. From that point forward, the family dynamic changed permanently, not dramatically, but fundamentally. Conversations were more direct, plans were discussed openly, and no one assumed authority by default. Lorraine remained part of the family, but no longer its ruler, and the WhatsApp group became what it should have been all along, a shared space, not a weapon. By the time Ethan and I shared our pregnancy news later that year, it wasn't Lorraine who announced it or framed it as her victory. It was Ethan and me together. And when Lorraine asked if she could share the news, I said yes and meant it, because for the first time, inclusion wasn't being negotiated, it was simply offered. By the time summer arrived, the family dynamic looked calm from the outside, but underneath, it was still rearranging itself like furniture moved after a long storm. Everyone knew where things stood now, even if no one said it outright. Lorraine no longer held the center, and that loss sat heavily on her shoulders. She participated, but cautiously, always watching reactions before speaking, always checking whether her words carried weight or simply floated away unanswered. Ethan noticed it too, and admitted quietly one night that it felt strange seeing his mother hesitate after a lifetime of certainty. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I understood it as consequence rather than punishment. Control, once surrendered, rarely returns in the same shape. The WhatsApp group had grown more active than ever. Cousins who barely spoke before now chimed in regularly. Jokes bounced freely, recipes were exchanged without approval, and plans formed organically instead of through directives. Helen remained a steady presence, stepping in only when needed, and otherwise letting the group breathe. That balance seemed to frustrate Lorraine most, because it proved leadership didn't require domination. Then came the moment she tried one last time to reclaim authority under the guise of concern. It started with a message she sent late one night, privately to several relatives, warning them that family cohesion was slipping and that too many voices were causing confusion. She framed it as worry about Mark's health and Claire's pregnancy stress, suggesting maybe the WhatsApp group needed structure again. Screenshots of those messages began circulating quietly as people compared notes, realizing she had sent nearly identical texts to multiple members, hoping to rally quiet support. One cousin forwarded the message directly into the family WhatsApp group, asking openly whether anyone else received something similar. The reaction was immediate and explosive, not with anger but with clarity. People replied honestly, saying yes, they received the same message, and no, they didn't feel confused or stressed. They felt included for the first time in years. Someone pointed out gently that chaos wasn't the problem, silence was. Lorraine joined the chat mid-conversation, her typing bubble appearing and disappearing repeatedly before she finally sent a long message about how she only wanted what was best for the family, how she felt responsible for holding everyone together, how difficult it was to watch things change so fast. Instead of sympathy, she received calm responses, one by one, people thanking her for past efforts, but explaining they preferred the current openness. Mark himself replied, saying he felt more relaxed now than he had in years, and that he didn't want anyone managing his relationships for him. That was the moment Lorraine lost the last illusion of quiet backing. No one attacked her, but no one defended her either, and the absence of defense spoke louder than any argument. She didn't leave the chat this time, she stayed and read as conversations continued around her, without centering her feelings. Days later, Ethan and I came over for dinner, just the three of us, something that hadn't happened since before the exclusion. The evening was awkward, polite, careful, like strangers negotiating shared space. Halfway through the meal, Lorraine set down her fork and said she needed to say something difficult. She admitted she had spent decades defining herself by her role as organizer, fixer, and authority, and that when she felt that slipping, she panicked and tried to enforce relevance by controlling access. She said removing me from the WhatsApp group was meant to remind everyone that she still decided who belonged. Hearing her say it out loud stripped the last layer of justification away. Ethan told her quietly that belonging isn't granted by parents, it's built by partners, and that marriage meant choosing each other first, even when it was uncomfortable. Lorraine cried, not dramatically but steadily, the kind of crying that comes from realizing something cannot be undone. She apologized again, this time to Ethan as much as to me, acknowledging she tried to put him back into a child's role to maintain her own sense of power. I told her I believed her apology, and that rebuilding trust would take consistency, not words. She nodded and accepted that without argument, which felt like the truest sign of change yet. The final shift came unexpectedly, a few weeks later at a large extended family gathering for a cousin's engagement party, where Lorraine arrived early and attempted to take charge of setup out of habit, directing people, arranging tables, issuing suggestions. But something different happened this time. People smiled, thanked her, and then continued with their own plans without deferring. No confrontation, no resistance, just quiet autonomy. Lorraine stood there watching as the family functioned without her command, and instead of lashing out, she stepped back and sat down beside me, asking where the drinks were kept. I told her, and she went to get them without instructing anyone else. It was a small moment, almost invisible, but it marked the true end of her reign. Later that evening, she raised a toast, congratulating the engaged couple, and thanked the family for teaching her how to be part of something rather than in charge of it. People applauded warmly, and I saw relief on her face mixed with humility. Months later, when Ethan and I prepared for the baby's arrival, Lorraine offered help cautiously, asking rather than assuming, and accepting no without offense. The WhatsApp group continued unchanged, vibrant, messy, and inclusive, and Lorraine remained in it, not as gatekeeper but as participant. The lesson had settled deeply. Control fractures families, while inclusion strengthens them, and once everyone saw that clearly, there was no going back. Looking back now, the strangest part of everything wasn't being removed from a WhatsApp group, or even being treated like I didn't belong. It was how quickly power dissolves once people stop being afraid of losing access. Lorraine had ruled quietly for years, not through cruelty, but through control of information, timing, and approval. And when that was taken away, the family didn't collapse, it expanded. People spoke more freely, laughed louder, and made decisions without waiting for permission. Even Lorraine seemed lighter once she stopped fighting for relevance through authority. The months that followed were calmer than any before them, and that calm felt earned rather than fragile. Ethan and I prepared for the baby together, painting the spare room, assembling furniture, learning how to exist in uncertainty without needing someone else to manage it for us. Lorraine visited occasionally, bringing small, thoughtful gifts, always asking first, always respecting space, and every time she did, it reinforced the shift that had already happened. When the baby was born early one morning, Ethan posted the announcement himself in the family WhatsApp group, a simple photo and a message full of pride and exhaustion and love. The responses poured in immediately, hearts, jokes, congratulations, advice, and for the first time, Lorraine wasn't the loudest voice. She was just one of many, and that was exactly where she belonged. She asked later if she could come by the hospital, and we said yes, and when she held the baby, she cried quietly, whispering that she was sorry it took her so long to learn that love isn't something you manage, it's something you show up for without conditions. Time passed, and the family continued to function without a central controller. Birthdays were planned collaboratively, holidays rotated hosts, and no one was excluded based on status or milestones. The WhatsApp group remained chaotic and alive, full of inside jokes, accidental double texts, and late-night rambling messages that made everyone feel included rather than filtered. Lorraine never asked to be admin again, and no one offered it to her, not out of spite, but because it wasn't necessary anymore. Sometimes she would joke about how she used to run the family like a board meeting, and how exhausting that must have been for everyone else, and people would laugh gently because the truth no longer needed defending. One afternoon, while watching our child nap, Lorraine said something that stayed with me. She said she used to believe being needed was the same as being loved, and losing control felt like losing purpose. But now she understood that being trusted was the real gift. I realized then that her biggest fear had never been losing authority, it was becoming optional. And when she learned that love doesn't disappear just because you step back, she finally found peace. Being removed from that WhatsApp group had hurt deeply at the time, but it forced every hidden dynamic into the light and gave the family a chance to rebuild itself honestly. I didn't win by planning revenge or humiliating anyone. I won by refusing to accept conditional belonging and by letting the truth expose itself naturally. Sometimes the easiest way to make someone regret exclusion is simply to stop chasing entry and allow everyone else to notice who is really creating the walls. The group chat still exists to this day, buzzing constantly, and every time my phone lights up with another ridiculous message, I smile, knowing that inclusion once denied became permanent the moment control lost its grip.